Thank you so much. I'm truly grateful to Professor Venkatmani for inviting me here, and of course Andrea for taking care of all the little details. The drive from Urbana last night was a little rough because of the snow and the slippery roads, but I'm very happy to be here today. So the title I chose for my talk today is Melancholia and Melodrama, approaching Indian film history through the cinematic lives of Devdas. I have a PowerPoint and just a few short clips to show at the end, so I will get on with it so that we have some time, hopefully at the end, for questions. So I will begin with the 1917 Bengali novel, Devdas, by Sarat Chandra Chattopadhyay. I'm pronouncing it in the Bengali way. And then I'll follow the cinematic afterlife of the novel through 4 films. The entire afterlife can be quantified as roughly 24 films on the novel itself. This novel, why this is special, it inaugurated a unique form of melancholia in Indian literature, conflating the aristocratic sense of enlightenment of the landed gentry on the one hand and the late colonial urban bourgeois sensibility. The eponymous hero of the novel was the first truly modern character, according to me, in Indian literature, and we can talk about this. And the novel's enduring influence is felt in most modern vernacular traditions in the Indian subcontinent. Apart from the films directly based on the novel, a subgenre of romantic sentimental melodramas made in every regional Indian language has perpetuated a melancholic type of heroism through a male protagonist who is damaged beyond redemption. In the melodramas indirectly influenced by Devdas, however, the late colonial socio-historical context of the original novel is almost always missing. It is usually replaced by a post-colonial teleology of some sorts of the nation, of which the melancholic hero cannot be a part. Devdas, the character, is a colonial prototype and a mimic man. He is sort of a literary hybrid of Goethe's Werther, of The Sorrows of Young Werther, the Persian Majnun of the Laila and Majnun story, and the mad lover of devotional poetry, at the intersection of the public and the private in colonial turn-of-the-century India. He also has shades of Mirza from Camus' L'étranger, The Outsider. He is, after all, an introspective suicidal hero in the age of burgeoning Indian nationalism. Whether his melancholy and alcoholism that were a result of his failure in love displaced colonial bourgeois angst is an open question. Now, there are surprisingly few central critical pieces of writing on Devdas and on the novelist himself. This is surprising because the author's milieu, both literary and social, if you're thinking of the late colonial, early nationalist period in Bengal, it has lent an extraordinary amount of critical mass to the production of post-colonial theory and criticism. Via Partha Chatterjee, Dipesh Chakraborty, Sumit Sarkar, not to mention Gayatri Spivak, but no one really wants to touch this novelist and this novel with a long quote, so we will look at that. Let me start with the plot of the novel itself. Devdas Mukherjee is the younger son of a zamindar, landlord of a village in Bengal. He is an unruly boy who is adored by Parvati or Paru, a girl from the same village. They attend the village school together, but Devdas leaves the village to attend college in Calcutta, while Parvati stays behind. The attachment between them is described as unusual and unconventional, but is shrugged off by adults as juvenile idiosyncrasy, and they face no scrutiny as such. But even Devdas and Paru feel awkward towards each other when they meet after Devdas comes back from Calcutta. He has grown from an unruly child into a brooding young man who is neither intellectually gifted nor is interested in academics. So this is kind of different from Werther, because Werther is constantly translating Homer and Ossian and is an intellectual. Devdas doesn't have any talent. He goes to college in Calcutta simply because his father pays for it and it is expected of him. Both Devdas and Paru, they have grown, undergone puberty, and they feel awkward to see each other. This is a society, especially in a village in 1917, that does not provide a social space for interaction between a grown man and a grown woman, unless they are related. Parvati's family belongs to the same caste. Both Devdas and Parvati are Brahmins, but there are some very complicated sub-caste issues that I have not really made the effort to look into. It's incredibly complex, the sub-caste in India and in Bengal. Devdas' father wants him to marry the daughter of someone wealthier than him, so that the bride will bring in dowry, and who knows, even a separate landlordship for Devdas. That way his own property doesn't have to get divided between his two sons. Parvati's parents have limited options because Parvati's family is poor, but they manage to find a wealthy groom for her. He is a landlord of equal or higher stature than Devdas' father, but he is a middle-aged widower. A landlord he has sons and daughters almost as old as Parvati. Devdas himself approaches his father in a desperate last attempt, asking if Parvati can be married to him, but it is not to be done. Before her wedding, Parvati sneaks into Devdas' house and suggests that they elope. Devdas refuses, as he doesn't want to dishonor either family. And of course, he is a coward too, to boot. As Parvati gets married, Devdas goes to the city of Calcutta for the first time to go to a brothel, following a friend to a brothel. The prostitute, Chandramukhi, who is the other female character, who is the object of Devdas' friend's affection, repulses Devdas. But Devdas discovers alcohol and the solace that only intoxication could provide him. Gradually, he turns into a brooding alcoholic who drinks to forget. He meets Parvati, now a married woman, when he visits home to perform his father's last rites. By this time, he is a fallen man, the mere shell of what he was. The signs of alcoholism and debauchery are visible on his body. Parvati, as well as members of his own family, are now almost afraid to communicate to him. He is damaged beyond repair. But Parvati requests him to come visit her in her matrimonial home, in her husband's house, when he is ill. It is a strange request, but what is normal is quite unclear in this novel. Devdas promises that he will indeed come to Parvati to die. And this eventually it happens. Even though Chandramukhi tries to save him, Chandramukhi gives up her trade, tries to save him from alcoholism, but no, he cannot. Devdas starts that last journey towards Parvati's home. He travels by train and finally by a horse carriage and then a bullock cart, frequently vomiting blood and drifting in and out of consciousness. By the time he reaches Parvati's village, he is unconscious. The carriage driver, the bullock cart driver, to avoid trouble, leaves him in the village square. He is discovered by villagers who care for him as much as they can. They search his pockets for anything to ascertain his identity, and they find some letters. By the time the news of this strange man named Devdas Mukhopadhyay dying in the village square reaches Parvati, the wife of the landlord, he is already dead. The novel ends with the author's plea to the readers to pray for such unfortunate souls as Devdas. So this is a kind of an interesting similarity between this novel's end and Werther, the way So the Sorrows of Young Werther ends, because he also dies and he is put in an unmarked grave because he committed suicide, and the readers are asked to sympathize with such a character. Now, Devdas is not an aristocrat with a long feudal past. It's very important to kind of place him in the time and space. Landlordship in British India evolved out of East India Company's Permanent Settlement Act in 1793, which consolidated the Mughal system of tax collection with administration, thus creating a class of people who were free to rule over peasants and other villagers so long as they paid taxes to East India Company and later the British Indian government. This class was strangely oppressive to the masses, but in itself it was only a mere functionary of the colonial enterprise. This class, mostly Hindu and mostly high caste, grew out of the compradors who were native informants and helpers to East India Company when it began its political expansion. So Lord Clive in the Battle of Plassey got the active help of the rich Hindu merchants and all that. And so when he eventually marched into the capital of the deposed Nawab Siraj-ud-Dowla, he opened the coffers to them. And so then the original aristocratic families of Calcutta, they just got their handful of riches. And an ancestor of Tagore was part of that group who got their hands on that chest. Now, it was this class that Thomas Babington Macaulay had in mind when he wanted to institutionalize Western education as a civilizing mission. Macaulay's Minute on Indian Education, 1835, dreamed of a seamless operation of colonial administration through a class Indian in blood but British in taste and education. The middle class was indeed formed in the shadow of that decision by the British government to institute English education as a civilizing management tool. And so Devdas was sent off to Calcutta to kind of partake in that kind of education. The first time a film was made on the novel, it was a silent film in 1928. Cinema production in India began in 1898, and Calcutta and Bombay were the two seaport cities that became the major centers for film production. The first studios were established in Bombay and Calcutta, and in the 1920s, there were at least 40 studios between the two cities producing silent films. Sound technology arrived in 1927. The first Hollywood sound film was shown in India, but the first talkies were produced in 1931 in Bombay and Calcutta in Hindi or Hindustani, Bengali, and several other languages from other parts of India. In the 1920s and the 30s, the dominant genres of Indian cinema were mythological, social, action, and fantasy. But even among those genres, the Calcutta studios were more aligned with the literary tradition. Bombay studios made films mostly in Hindi or Hindustani, a language which was sort of pan-Indian. It was kind of the lingua franca of the entire northern part of the subcontinent, but it was not the native language of the city, which was mostly, for the city, it was mostly Gujarati and Marathi. The producers in Calcutta were, interestingly, more inclined towards using Bengali novels as the basis of their films, and they had an endless supply of that. Sarat Chandra, the author of Devdas, was a best-selling author. He was already a legendary author when he published this novel, and he was thus a logical choice for producers looking for stories. About a dozen silent films were made on several of his novels, all of which are lost, by the way. The social genre to which those films belonged required an aesthetics of different sort from the somewhat juvenile pleasures of the special effects in the other two genres, mythological and fantasy, action fantasy. And its aesthetics of the social genre became the foundation of a huge body of films when sound arrived. The success of talkies in India was predicated on the narrative tool that Indian filmmakers used from the very beginning. And this is the thing that still holds true for Indian cinema. This is the non-diegetic song, a song that can play, which has absolutely no relation with the time or space or the actors or even the characters, what is going on. The songs were sung by the actors in the beginning when sound cinema began. The first sound film that was released in the March of 1931, Alam Ara in Hindi or Hindustani, it had about a dozen songs. So even the first one. So this non-diegetic song, it suspended, deferred, or even replaced action. So this was kind of a tool. It was much more than entertainment, it was a tool. So it was sung by the actors in the beginning and were recorded at the same time as the dialogue. So sometimes you would often see that the actors just standing there and singing the song because they don't want to mess with the recording of the song. But from 1936 onwards, playback music became the established standard. The song would be recorded earlier, and the actor would mime the singing during the shooting of the film, which was the case even if it was the actor who was singing the songs, playback song. So which was the case of the first Hindi film actor who played Devdas, Kundan Saigal. He is the one who sang the songs, but he recorded the songs earlier, and then he would mime, he would lip sync to the songs. even if that, so they will be synced together. So there is a reason why I'm spending so much time giving an overview of the cinematic tradition. Cinema as an art form seems uniquely disadvantaged when it comes to feelings. How do you show happiness, sorrow, if it does not have what T.S. Eliot called an objective correlative? How do you show someone happy or someone sad? How do you do that? How do you show someone brooding, someone, how do you do that? So this is where the non-diegetic song became the most useful tool in the Indian cinematic aesthetic. What do people do when they're sad? Well, they sing a sad song. So, and of course, the non-diegetic film song had other functions when it came to the depiction of sexuality, because a boy and a girl could do nothing that normal people would do in real life. Mainly what we're talking about is a bourgeois and a European 19th century reality. They could always sing a song. It was adopted by the novelists. So novelists such as Sarat Chandra Chattopadhyay, Rabindranath Tagore, and even the first song is the earlier generation really cool tool. They adopted 19th century realism in reality. They catered to the bourgeoisie in every modern Indian language when novels began to be written. So it was in the novels such as Devdas, that any conflict between colonial modernity and pre-colonial tradition could be negotiated. Because the novels, they are mainly focusing on this strange intermediary class who are just a functionary of British imperialism, but they have pretty much unlimited power over the masses. But even a negotiated modernity, as depicted in the colonial and later the nationalist novels, was not the stuff that resonated with the majority of the cinema audiences, who were non-literate and lived below the socially secure levels that the bourgeoisie lived. So cinema in India was the art form that really broke the barriers, which really became the tool of universal modernity that broke the class and caste and religious and even the regional barriers, because you could take cinema anywhere. You just need to have functional eyes to watch a movie. This is where the form of melodrama, this is where melodrama comes in, became crucial for Indian cinema. Now, following Peter Brooks, who has the kind of the seminal book on melodrama, we can say that melodrama is less a genre than an imaginative mode, though the application of melodrama in the Indian context arose from a different need. Great writers such as Balzac and Henry James, whom Peter Brooks discusses, could not be constrained by a realist aesthetic. For them, melodrama was the artistic imperative. So this happened even in 19th century novel. In Indian melodrama, in Indian cinema, melodrama becomes the cultural and political imperative. So that's the language that can translate all these novels, these bourgeois novels, for the masses. The social genre, as opposed to the mythological and the action fantasy, depended on the traditional comic trope, the formation of the heterosexual couple within the political structure. So at the end, the male and the female protagonists, they have to come together and somehow become these productive citizens, either of the empire or later of the nation. And so therefore the cycle of bourgeois life could continue. After India became an independent nation state, because of the grossly unequal layers of society that cinema catered to, the pre-modern systems of loyalty, be they patriarchy, class or caste-based, had to coexist with the promise of equality of citizenship that the Constitution granted. Because there was actually no equality, there still isn't in the post-colonial and the post-colonial era. The social genre that had initially premised itself on a social realism had to move closer to melodrama. So it had to be a love story. The couple formation had to be the happy ending, because their social justice or a social reconciliation could not really be a happy ending for Indian cinema, realistically. So therefore, melodrama and love stories, that is the material of it. It was not possible for social realism to continue as a marketable form without producing sad narratives of poor, disappointed people whose dreams could not be realized. So there was art cinema or parallel cinema that developed for that, but that no one, you could not, you would literally have to pay the poor people to go and watch films about their poverty. So the focus had to be taken away from linear aspirations into indeterminate categories such as feelings, love, loyalty, tradition, etc. The aspirations and the realizations of the aspirations were all bourgeois, since this was the class which was making the films to begin with. A melodramatic social film that foregrounded emotion was a winning proposition. And this could be perfectly achieved with the help of non-diegetic song that bridged the gap between a constructed set of bourgeois norms, bourgeois values, bourgeois expressions of emotion, and the audience, which is not bourgeois. And this is what Indian cinema has done for the last 80 years of sound cinema. The character of Devdas is the first perfect paradigm for this displacement of disappointment, of acceptance onto melancholia. And this is the dream role for any actor in this system of production. So the first sound film or talkie made on Devdas was in 1935, which featured P.C. Barua, Pramathesh Barua, in the role of Devdas. P.C. Barua was himself a landlord and an alcoholic. He also directed the film, so it was a perfect project for him. It was so successful that he decided to remake it in Hindi, and Devdas was played by Kundanlal Saigal, K.L. Saigal, the first singing star of Indian cinema. The Hindi version was even more popular, and it launched the tradition of the melancholic hero in Indian cinema, who could be a colonial or national subject and seems to be affected by an emotional crisis that strangely makes him attractive. That's the only attractive thing about him. The Devdas type, as opposed to the actual character Devdas, became the perfect embodiment of real-life disappointments. Think about post-colonial India. Unemployment, poverty, oppression turned into a melancholic state of mind. This is the sensitive hero who would rather emote than act. And rather than drawing attention to injustice, he would hide behind a melancholic curtain. His sensitivity can be cinematically established through music, which is the common friend of both melancholia and melodrama. So it's a marriage made in heaven. Now, efforts were made in the film industry to fight against this celebration of inaction, which this film basically is. V. Shantaram, one of the legendary directors of silent, Marathi, and Hindi cinema, made in 1939 a film which was just anti-Devdas. This is a love story. This is a seminal film. It was called Admi in Hindi and Manus in Marathi. Both means man or human being. This is a love story between Kesar, a prostitute, and Moti, a police constable. The prostitute falls in love with the police constable, but cannot marry him because of objections from his mother. So the police constable's mother is not excited about her son, who has a productive job marrying a prostitute. They are defined, unlike Parvati and Devdas, who just give in or give up. But Kesar, the prostitute, is unable to escape her past, and eventually she ends up murdering her pimp who is extorting her, so he ends up murdering him. As she goes to prison, Kesar leaves a life-affirming message for the suicidal Moti, who doesn't want to live without her, telling him not to give up the world for her love. And Moti lives. Shantaram spoke of his desire to make a film about marginal characters without depicting them as martyrs or saints, or even sentimental romantics. That is, it was a rejoinder to the Devdas aesthetics. But Agni or Manus is an exceptional film that could not change the rules of the ruling genre. Between 1935, the first talkie based on Devdas, and today, close to 24 films have been made on Devdas. And a film such as Manus or Agni, it does not have a lineage, right? It does not, so that movement died. And the formula is so this is Devdas, which was first made in Telugu, 1953, and Devdasa in Tamil. This stars Akkineni Nageshwara Rao. There's this interesting anecdote about him. He never touched alcohol in his life, so how he could, so he was really worried how he's going to produce that look of a drunk and person in stupor. So it is said that he requested that the scenes which required him to be drunk to be shot in nighttime, and he would stay up all day and have a belly full of rice and curry, whatever kind of curry he had. So he was, almost just dying of sleep when he would. So you'd have that droopy look in his eyes, to do that. Yeah. So the formula was so successful that, and so there is the 1955 film from which we'll watch some clips, starring Dilip Kumar and Suchitra Sen and Vaijayanti Mala. Interestingly, the director of this film is Bimal Roy, who was the cameraman for P.C. Barua's 1935 and 1936 film. The formula is so successful that the most successful film, the first Bollywood film to premiere at Cannes, that was based on Devdas. Bollywood's rise and success is tied to the neoliberal pro-corporate state that does not glorify dissidents against the nation state. So why this story? There is no need, or rather the opportunity for Bollywood to recreate the cinematic feeling of loss and longing. What it does in this film is it celebrates Devdas as a type and a past. Devdas now belongs to Bollywood's cinematic past, the cinematic past of Indian cinema. It has lavish sets flooded with lights, makeup, jewelry, gaudy clothes and furniture. Parvati and Chandramukhi are played by Aishwarya Rai and Madhuri Dixit, and Madhuri Dixit came out of a semi-retirement to play the role. And I have this, before I go to the clips, I have this sort of priceless commentary on Madhuri Dixit and Aishwarya Rai.
Terrific. Is that woman Aishwarya Rai? Yes, isn't she an amazing actress? Actually, I'd say she's a poor man's Madhuri Dixit. How dare you? Aishwarya Rai is a goddess. By comparison, Madhuri Dixit is a leprous prostitute. Sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. Obviously, you're not that familiar with Indian cinema.
So this is really interesting because it is and I am approaching the end of my talk, but I wanted to show you something. So this is the film that inaugurated Bollywood's global ascendance and Bollywood's entry into the festival circuit. So before that, Cannes was about Indian cinema, but it was the Festival de Cannes reminds us of Nichanagar, Chetananand's Nichanagar, which got the Grand Prix in 1946, and of course Satyajit Ray's Pather Panchali in 1956. So that was what Cannes was interested in. So, but the premiere of Devdas was powered in by the industry and its friends with an advertisement campaign and release of merchandise to coincide with the premiere. What you have here is a limited edition of Barbie and Ken dolls of Devdas and Chandramukhi and Parvati. So this is Devdas, this is a Ken, Devdas Ken. Right? And so Sanjay Leela Bhansali, in the beginning credits of the film, paid tribute to the best-known earlier versions of the Devdas. So the film begins with tribute to Sarat Chandra Chattopadhyay, the novelist, and P.C. Barua and Bimal Roy. To the viewers at the Cannes premiere, the credits and the ostentatious form of the film were meant to underscore the global emergence of Indian melodrama. Indian melodrama is here, with its long history within its own cinematic context. There was understandably some backlash against this. So the Cannes organizers, they were criticized for picking this film, right? And if I can venture a guess as to what was the straw that broke the camel's back, the film is intolerable to begin with, but it was this. It is the lamp that never goes out is the lamp that never extinguishes. This is the symbol of their love. And this is Bollywood's fascination with CGI that it has just picked up like 5 minutes ago, and it cannot let that lamp. So there's this entire dance with the lamp, and the lamp never goes up. This is, I mean, I'm just guessing. If I were one of the organizers, I mean, this would definitely, this would be the straw that broke the camel's back. So the last film, so Khan, in in the context of Indian cinema, reminds us of these films, and then of course, the last film that I will mention is Dev D. The hero is transplanted in post-global India, and he goes through a phase of frenzy fueled by vodka, not just vodka, but Smirnoff, and you see nice product placement there, and cocaine. And finally, he realizes he doesn't love Paro anymore, or rather, he never actually loved Parvati. He then rides off with the prostitute. He's wearing a T-shirt which reads KGB. I have, you see that. So this is a GIF. So until the next film on Devdas arrives, this is the image that we're left with. So I'm going to show the clips now. So there are about 7 minutes of the clips. So this is the, you'll see the formulaic repetition of the last few hours of Devdas's life. He's dying, trying to desperately to reach Paro's village in a bullock cart. And then Parvati wakes up from the sleep with the feeling of something ominous. So the bullock cart driver, he just leaves him in the square. And then when Parvati hears about that, she starts this epic running towards Devdas. And the door of her landlord's mansion closes. So every film, it kind of, it has a combination of long shots and close-ups that, of the door dramatically closing onto Parvati. So here comes the clips. So it's, you will figure out, they are from the all four films. So I'm going to use that.